Imagine walking through a modern Italian city and being greeted by medieval giant towers, some of which are over 100 meters tall. Even by today's standards, that's almost as tall as a skyscraper. But you don't see these giants today. So, what happened to them? Were they even real? Once upon a time, Bologna was the medieval New York of the world, or more accurately, the Manhattan of northern Italy. In its prime, Bologna was called La Turrita, or the Towered, having as many as 200 towers. No kidding, 200. These were not merely ornamental luxuries of the Middle Ages, they were the pinnacle of medieval aristocracy's prestige. But why construct a tower? Why not a comfortable house by the coast? In medieval Italy, it was always a question of dominance and authority. Communal cities such as Bologna, Venice, Florence, Siena, and others were constantly in rivalry. Rich people wanted to demonstrate their superiority, and what better way to do that than by building a skyscraper? These towers were not only tall, but were also constructed to be nearly indefensible, serving as protective structures during wars. If your neighbor got angry, you could shut yourself inside your house and remain out of reach by staying up in your tower. Imagine that. The towers were usually built beside the main house of the family, forming a compound with a defense system. Constructed with defense in mind, they had small doors, thick walls, and a few windows, making them easy to defend. Many even had drawbridges and other defensive features that would make any medieval architect green with envy. The taller the tower, the greater the status of the family. This led to a competition in architectural grandeur among the nobility in Bologna. Regarding tower construction, families tried to build structures higher and more magnificent than those of their rivals, doing everything they could to achieve this goal. But it wasn't just about height. These towers were adorned with beautiful carvings that displayed the owner's wealth. This competition was not exclusive to Bologna. The same trend was observed in other Italian cities. For example, San Gimignano was originally home to 72 towers and was once nicknamed Medieval Manhattan. Now, only 14 towers remain. But if these towers were so remarkable, where are they now? As we've seen, power has its seasons, and even the most powerful symbols have a shelf life. By the 14th century, Bologna's skyline was undergoing a significant change. All these tower buildings' squabbles grew too much, and the local government began making regulations banning tall towers. Skyscrapers became as desirable as pagers and Blackberries. People wanted nothing to do with them and were even ashamed to have them. Wealthy individuals started constructing elaborate castles, furnishing with all imaginable luxuries. These new residences were not just about height, but comfort and elegance. With the towers, they were allowed to decay, be demolished, or turned into much less grand structures. But the decline of these towers wasn't just about changing tastes. Major changes in Italy's political landscape in the 14th century also played a role. The rise of powerful regional lords like the Visconti of Milan and the Medici of Florence accelerated the centralization process. City-states such as Bologna, which had previously enjoyed a high level of autonomy, were now dominated by other powers, reducing the need for towers as symbols of power and independence. In Bologna, for instance, the local government actively worked to curb the construction of towers. Some towers were demolished, while others were simply abandoned. Earthquakes were another factor, not just one or two a year, but several strong ones in a week. Italy is no country for solid foundations, and many of these towers bore the brunt of centuries of natural disasters. Some were completely dismantled, while others had to be trimmed down to prevent them from collapsing like a house of cards. Bologna's towers were significantly damaged by earthquakes leading to their gradual decline. Just when you thought these towers were destined to be forgotten, along came Count Giovanni Gozzadini, a 19th century Italian historian with a passion for heritage. He dedicated his life to documenting all the towers that had ever been built in Bologna. Though he may have overdone it a little, modern historians think he may have counted a few towers twice. Gozzadini's work brought renewed attention to Bologna's medieval skyscrapers. Even today, if you are fortunate enough to visit Bologna, this towering past is not hard to find. Fewer than 20 of these towers still exist, standing as symbols of the city's medieval past. The best known of these are the Asinelli and Garisenda towers, which are still visible in Bologna. The Asinelli Tower, built to a height of nearly 100 meters, offers a splendid opportunity to take in a bird's-eye view of the city and its surroundings. It has become a popular spot for photographs, especially for tourists. It takes 498 steps to reach the top, and while this can be quite tiring, the view of Bologna and the countryside is marvelous. The Asinelli Tower was constructed in the early 12th century by a noble family from Bologna named the Asinelli. Over the centuries, the tower has withstood earthquakes, wars, and the passage of time, making it one of the best preserved medieval towers in Italy. The Garisenda Tower, meanwhile, tilts as if it wants to challenge the Leaning Tower of Pisa for the title. Originally, it had been much taller, but in the 14th century, it had been cut down to a safer height. You might call it a midlife crisis. The Garisenda Tower was built by the Garisendi family during the same period as the Asinelli Tower. However, due to the weak ground on which it was constructed, the tower began leaning soon after its completion. The lean became so severe that the top had to be removed to prevent the tower from collapsing. Today, the Garisenda Tower stands at approximately 48 meters, much shorter than its original height. But Bologna's towers are not just monuments, they are thriving parts of the city. The Asinelli Tower is still used as a symbol of Bologna's power and unity among its citizens. It appears on postcards, business cards, and official documents that highlight the city's history. Despite their reduced numbers, the towers of Bologna remain as monumental reminders of the city's prosperous and fiercely competitive past. These towers, which once symbolized the authority and grandeur of feudal lords, are now objects of admiration for tourists. Their presence gives people a sense of what life was like back then. Even now, strolling through the city, one can still sense the medieval competition of Bologna and the desire of the elite to build taller and more magnificent structures than their neighbors. In the modern world, these towers provoke thoughts about the constant transformation of human desires and the spaces around us. As our needs and tastes evolve, so does the architecture that serves society. Yet traces of the past remain a part of us. Seeing Bologna with some of its towers still intact proves that history in some way is eternal. So, whether you are interested in history, a lover of architecture, or just a curious tourist, Bologna's medieval towers offer more than just a glimpse into the past. They are evidence that history is not confined to books, but is real and tangible. If you enjoyed this, check out the other videos below for more interesting comparisons and current topics.